Mark Williams took immense pride in his home. At 34, he juggled long hours as a mechanic, but always reserved his weekends for yard work. His modest house, adorned with neatly trimmed hedges and vibrant flower beds, showcased his commitment and keen attention to detail. Recently, Mark decided to upgrade his lawn care routine by investing in a new riding lawnmower from Home Depot. It was a bit of an indulgence, but he believed it would save him both time and effort in the long run. The morning he unpacked the mower, he felt as thrilled as a child on Christmas morning. He meticulously read through the manual, filled the tank with gas, and even gave the machine a quick polish. As he sat on the mower for the first time, gripping the steering wheel, a smile spread across his face. This is going to make things so much easier, he thought. However, Mark's excitement was soon challenged. His next-door neighbor, Karen, a middle-aged woman known for causing trouble, was already on his radar. Often dressed in outfits more suitable for someone half her age, she had a habit of interfering in others' business. Known for her entitled attitude and, unfortunately, her racist remarks, Karen had clashed with several neighbors over the years, always playing the victim and making false accusations to get her way. As Mark started the mower and began cutting his grass, the familiar hum of the engine filled the air. It was the typical sound of a riding mower, nothing out of the ordinary. But within minutes, Karen's front door flew open and she stormed out. With her face twisted in anger, she marched across her yard and onto Mark's property, her high heels sinking into the grass. Standing directly in the path of the mower, she forced Mark to slam on the brakes to avoid hitting her. "What do you think you're doing?" she yelled, her voice full of contempt. Mark immediately turned off the mower and removed his ear protection. "I'm just mowing my lawn," he replied calmly, even though his heart was racing from the sudden confrontation. Karen folded her arms and glared at him. "Do you have any idea how loud that thing is? You're disturbing the entire neighborhood, and my ears. I can't stand this noise. It's giving me a headache." Mark took a deep breath, trying to stay composed. "Ma'am, I'm simply taking care of my yard. It's the middle of the day, and mowing the grass now is perfectly normal. I'm not breaking any rules." Karen wasn't having any of it. "Normal? This is anything but normal. You're being completely inconsiderate. If you don't stop right now, I'm calling the police." Mark blinked, stunned by her aggression. "You're really going to call the cops over this?" he asked, his voice filled with disbelief. With a smug smirk, Karen seemed to enjoy the power she thought she had. "You'll see what happens when you mess with me," she declared. Realizing that reasoning with her was pointless, Mark decided to wait for the police to arrive, confident that he hadn't done anything wrong. As he stood there, the gravity of the situation hit him. This wasn't just about mowing the lawn. It was about standing up to someone who thought they could bully him because of the color of his skin. Within minutes, the police arrived, their cruiser pulling up to the curb with flashing lights. 2 police officers stepped out of their cruiser, their faces unreadable as they approached Mark and Karen. Without missing a beat, Karen launched into her well-rehearsed performance, her voice trembling with fake distress. "Thank goodness you're here!" she cried, clutching her chest dramatically. "This man has been terrorizing me with that loud machine. He's disturbing the peace and endangering my health. I demand you arrest him." The officers turned to Mark, who stood calmly beside his lawn mower. "Sir, can you explain what's happening here?" one asked in a professional yet open tone. Mark nodded, his voice calm. "Certainly, officers. I was just mowing my lawn as I do every weekend. I recently got this mower, and it's my first time using it. I didn't think I was causing any trouble." He pointed to the mower, still parked neatly on his property. "It's the middle of the day, and I'm just taking care of my yard. I never imagined it would be an issue." The officers then turned their attention back to Karen, who was still visibly upset. "Ma'am, is there anything else you'd like to add?" one of them asked. Karen huffed, her face red with anger. "He's lying. He's been at it for hours and won't stop. I can't take it anymore." The officers exchanged a look, clearly unimpressed by her exaggerated claims. One officer walked over to the mower and inspected it briefly. "This is a standard riding mower," he explained. "It's not unusually loud, and it's perfectly legal to use during daylight hours." Karen's eyes widened in disbelief. But he's still disturbing me. Doesn't that count for something?" The second officer shook his head. "Ma'am, mowing the lawn during the day isn't a crime. If the noise bothers you, perhaps you should consider closing your windows or using ear plugs." Karen opened and closed her mouth like a fish out of water, unable to form a rebuttal. The officers then turned back to Mark. "You're free to finish up, but please try to keep it quick, okay?" one said. Mark nodded, relief evident in his expression. "Thank you, officers. I'll be done soon." As the police cruisers drove away, Karen's frustration boiled over. She spun toward Mark, her face contorted with rage. "You think you're so clever, don't you?" she spat. "You're nothing but a monkey, and you're beneath me. If you ever mow this lawn again, I'll make sure you regret it." Mark stared at her, shocked by her overt racism. Choosing not to engage further, he simply climbed back onto his mower and restarted it, determined to finish his work. Later that evening, as he sat in his living room, Mark was still rattled by the encounter. Karen's venomous words echoed in his mind, leaving him with a deep sense of injustice. Even though he knew he hadn't done anything wrong, her threats and racist insults had left him feeling exposed. Determined to protect himself, Mark resolved to look into Karen's background. He spent countless hours scouring the internet, sifting through public records and news articles. What he discovered left him stunned. Karen had a criminal record, one that included charges of inappropriate behavior with high school students. She had been branded a certified predator and had even served time for her offenses. Mark's eyes widened as he read through the details, coming to the realization of just how dangerous Karen truly was. He printed copies of her criminal record, detailing her charges and convictions, and carefully filed them away in a folder. If Karen tried to escalate things again, he knew he'd be ready. Mark also took steps to fortify himself both mentally and emotionally. He anticipated that she might come after him the next time he mowed his lawn, and he was determined to stand his ground. He practiced keeping his cool under pressure, constantly reminding himself that he had every right to care for his property. Sitting at his kitchen table, staring down at the folder of documents, Mark felt a surge of resolve. He wasn't going to let Karen intimidate him any longer. The next time she attempted to bully him, he would be ready to fight back, not with anger, but with the truth. The following weekend, Mark woke up determined to finish what he had started. He expected another confrontation from Karen, but this time, he was prepared. As he fired up his riding lawnmower and began cutting the grass, he kept a close watch on Karen's house. Sure enough, within minutes, her front door flew open and she stormed out. With her face contorted in rage, Karen marched straight toward Mark, her heels sinking into the grass as she crossed onto his property. "I told you not to mow this lawn again," she yelled, her voice sharp and grating. Mark calmly turned off the mower and took off his ear protection, staying composed despite her hostility. "I'm just maintaining my yard, Karen. I have every right to do that," he responded evenly. Karen's eyes narrowed as she pointed a shaking finger at him. "You're not just mowing the lawn. You're a drug user, and you're putting this entire neighborhood at risk. I'm calling the police, and this time they'll arrest you." Before Mark could reply, Karen was already dialing 911. "Hello, police. I need you to come right away. There's a dangerous man here who's using drugs and threatening me. He's a menace to the community." Mark shook his head in disbelief at her nerve. Then he reached into the storage compartment of his mower and pulled out the folder of documents he had carefully prepared. While they waited for the police to arrive, Karen continued hurling accusations at him. her voice growing louder and more frantic by the second. When the police cruiser finally pulled up, she rushed over to the officers in a panicked tone. "Thank goodness you're here! This man is a drug user, and he's threatening me. You need to arrest him immediately," she cried. The officers then turned their attention to Mark, who remained calm and composed. "Officers, I'd like to show you something," Mark said, as he handed them a folder. "This woman has a long history of making false accusations. She's a convicted predator with a criminal record for inappropriate behavior with minors. I believe she's trying to harass me simply because I stood up to her." Karen's face went pale as the officers opened the folder and began reviewing the documents. "That's not true!" she shrieked, lunging toward Mark in an attempt to snatch the papers. "He's lying! He's trying to ruin my life!" The officers stepped between them, their expressions hardening as they examined Karen's criminal record. "Ma'am, these documents appear to be legitimate," one officer stated. "You need to calm down and stop making false accusations." At that moment, Karen's hysteria reached its peak as she realized her lies were unraveling. "You can't believe him! He's a liar, a criminal!" she screamed, her voice cracking with desperation. The officers, now fully aware of her true character, issued her a stern warning. "Ma'am, making false accusations is a crime. If you continue this behavior, you may face charges." But Karen was beyond reason. In a burst of rage, she lunged at Mark, her hands clawing through the air as she tried to attack him. The officers acted swiftly, tackling her to the ground and handcuffing her. "You're under arrest for assault and making false reports," one officer declared, as Karen struggled against the cuffs. "No! You can't do this to me!" Karen screamed, tears streaming down her face. "I'm the victim here. He's the one who should be arrested." The neighbors who had gathered to witness the scene erupted into applause as Karen was led to the police cruiser. "Good riddance," one shouted. "We've been waiting for this day." Mark watched as the cruiser drove away, feeling a deep sense of relief and justice. He climbed back onto his mower and finished cutting the grass, the hum of the engine now a soothing sound instead of a source of stress. Later that evening, he joined his neighbors for an impromptu celebration. They laughed and recounted stories of Karen's reign of terror, grateful that her toxic behavior had finally been exposed. As the sun set, Mark stood in his driveway, gazing at his neatly mowed lawn, feeling a quiet pride in knowing he had stood up to injustice with dignity and intelligence. Karen's era of terror was over, and the neighborhood could finally breathe easy. The night ended with Mark sharing a laugh with his neighbors, the sound of their joy echoing down the streets as they celebrated a new beginning for their community.